Woke up the next day, got all my stuff together, left. Went across the Nile one last time on that ferry. Still super cool. It wasn't nearly as early as the first time. Um, we, well, my sister, she kind of complained about how we were waking up so early, so this is the last day that we woke up so early. Um, Went across the Nile, met up with the Egyptologist, and headed on our way to go to Luxor. So the road to Luxor is actually really quite a drive. And I think that was supposed to be maybe the boat ride that we were going to take, but I think all of the boats were docked. I can't imagine getting on a boat in the middle of a pandemic anyway, like all those people together and yeah, bad. Um, we got in the car and started driving. So the first place we stopped at was actually, I had no idea that this place even existed. And the first place we went to was a place called Coembo? Combe Ombo. Combe Ombo. Combe Ombo. Komombo. Combe Ombo. Anyway, as the Egyptologist was explaining it to us down the path of where we were going, he said, crocodile. Wait, crocodile. There is a temple in Egypt that is dedicated to Sobek? Apparently, there is, in fact, a temple in Egypt that is dedicated to Sobek. So that was interesting. I got really excited about it. So Koambo is a temple to Sobek and Horus. There's a couple other things on the inside of it. I couldn't read them. I was in a bit too much of a hurry. But um if I was reading correctly, it was all about, I think in this temple it was all about like medical things. Um this is funny because in this temple they believed that Horus was like a healer, maybe a doctor. I don't know. So through the whole string of the temple, you had, I mean, obviously you had a bunch of Sobek, and Sobek was everywhere, but like it was a bunch of like doctors' utensils and a lot of Horus, lots of Sobek though. I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on with Sobek. Um, there was a lot of like inscriptions of things on the wall. It looked like they were like the utensils that you use when you're like in medical, right? And then there was this one place, I think it was that one, that they actually had like the dates. So I think it was like the days of the month or maybe like the months of the year. Um I'll have to go back and look at my notes later. But it was an interesting temple. So we get up into the temple and you know, obviously Lance is going through stuff, looking at things, kind of trying to dig into a couple of them. There were like a couple of holes, and I really wanted to try to get into those holes and see what was down inside of them. but the holes literally were just there for like water main. Again, God of the Nile. I do believe Sobek has. I think Sobek is god of fertility too. I mean, God of the Nile. Nile represents life, right? And all of the stuff I was reading on these walls, like all the inscriptions, like I wasn't going through hieroglyphs because I didn't have time. But if you paid enough attention to like the writings on walls, you could make out what was going on. And this happened a lot through going to Egypt. Like I could pinpoint things enough that I knew what was happening. It was incredible to read it. So I'm thinking, what are all these hieroglyphs then? Like, why haven't I ever read anything about this? Why isn't there things, books, anything about this? And I wanted everything I could possibly think of about this temple. You get out of the temple, and there's a museum. The museum has these crocodiles on the inside of them that are mummified. It was really cool to see mummified crocodiles. I guess they mummified pretty much everything. I can't imagine why you would mummify a crocodile unless it was a pet. So does that mean that Egyptians may have actually like? Can you domesticate a crocodile? Probably not. It's a crocodile. Still, like, how cool is it to think that they mummified a crocodile because it was a pet of some pharaoh? That's a pretty badass pharaoh. Yeah. Anyway, so you get in there and you see these crocodiles, and it's a big spurring case of these crocodiles, like huge case. And I sat there and I kind of looked at them, and I was like, nobody was around me. It was just me at this one little space right there, right? Um, I started like, reading things and going through inscriptions and so on and so forth. And the biggest thing I noticed was actually a statue. And on the statue, there was a lot of hieroglyphs, which only made me wonder further why I've never heard of this temple before. Why I don't have any track record of any of the stories of this temple, and why I haven't read anything about what was inside of it. So, Lance starts getting a lot of questions in his head, and these questions keep going. I found a lot of things on the inside of the museum. Um, there was like, the statue of him, there was the crocodiles, there was this one statue, and it went all the way around with hieroglyphs. And I tried to get as many of those hieroglyphs as humanly possible in the picture. It's really hard to take pictures of hieroglyphs on a black statue. Now, the things that got me the most about this whole museum and whole temple, first of all, was this giant. It was almost obelisk-like, but I think it was just a wall of the temple. And it was huge, just enormous, but it was the only one there. And it was like to my right-hand side when I got out of the car. So the first thing I saw was this bottom part with the gods on it. And then this big wall. It was like a mural of Sobek. And it was an interesting temple. Like, they had this temple had a club down at the bottom, like down a staircase. It wasn't really like a nightclub, but it was like a club. You know, it was more like a, maybe it was like the Egyptian version of the Elks Club or something. But it was really impressive because next to this club was nothing but just farmland. And then next to that was a bunch of houses. And I sat there looking at these houses thinking, so people live right next to this temple. And around the temple was the Nile. Seriously? We're just going to sit here with a club, farmland, houses, and live right next to the Nile. That was awesome. Really, that was freaking awesome. There cannot be that much to this temple because this temple is so small. But there were a lot of hieroglyphs in this temple. A lot. Um, I couldn't believe that there was a Sobek temple. I can't believe it flew under my radar. I have all of this freaking knowledge of all of this ancient Egyptian stuff. I knew Sobek existed. I just never knew there was a temple. And, well, I live you learn. So, Lance has been adamantly trying to learn more about the temple since he got home. Eventually, we got out of the temple and started heading to the next one. So the last place we went on the inside of Aswan was Edfu, Edfu, EDFU. I'm not sure how to pronounce that in Egyptian. Yeah. Anyway, it's the Temple of Horus. If we haven't figured this out already, and I did, there is a residence, literal residence of Horus in Aswan. So the Temple of Isis, the Philae Temple, was a Horus temple. That was Horus the Avenger, obviously. Again, we all know the story of Isis and Osiris, and then Horus. The Sobek Temple, which is actually, Sobek and Horus, not really Horus, just kind of there-ish. And now we have a full temple of Horus. This Horus temple, the Edfu temple, was monstrous. Huge. The doorway must have been made for like a giant. It was huge. So, the front of it, if I remember correctly, it had like two gods, and then it looked like two guys that were shooting something. Probably like a spear. I would think it was a spear. And my god, like walking into it, you just felt like an ant. Like, I looked up when I was entering the temple, and I looked at the doorway, and it was like, who would they have made this temple for? Like, why is it so big? You know? Stuff was written all over the inside of the doorway. There was like pillars everywhere, and every single pillar had something written on it. So of course, I started taking pictures of everything and trying to get my hands on things, and bent down and put my hand down onto the ground, and obviously said something. I may have done that on almost every temple I went to. I was in Egypt. I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. Um, I'll get into that whole thing later, though. Like, I'm just trying to get through the whole. Yeah. Um, it was gigantic. And on the inside of one of their little things was the doorway. And the doorway had, like, what looked to be like a boat on the inside of it. I can't remember what the boat was, but super cool. Very old school Egyptian sculpture. Like, I was dying to go into this room, but you can't go into this room. Really disappointing. That wouldn't be the first time that, like, the disappointment hit me when I couldn't go into somewhere, right? But getting to see that was incredible. Um, I might try to get a little more into the Temple of Horus later in Edifu, because there's a lot of stuff written on the walls of the temple, and maybe I could, like, point out everything that it says. Um, I don't want to spend too much time just explaining the temple, so I'll do that later. In any case, so we leave, and we meet up with this guy, and this is the missed opportunity. For some reason, that was, obviously the end of having Mohammed with us. And my brain didn't quite get that. So I thought that we were going to be like, going to like one last place and then like dropping him off at that place, maybe like a museum or something, like, because we always went to like these weird random museums up there. No. In the middle of a street corner, like in the middle of an intersection, they stopped the van and he bounced out and got onto a bus and went straight back. And I'm like, what? Weird, random places we dropped these people off at. So that was a missed opportunity. And Lance learned from there that when he feels like he needs to get a selfie with one of the Egyptologists, he just needs to go ahead and do it. So I went looking the next time for a place to get said picture with the Egyptologist. And I found the perfect place. I'll get into that. So, the drive to Luxor was really, really long. And I'm not gonna lie, I think I fell asleep. When you're driving like that, the street kind of hits you, and you get to like mountains and there's like nothing there, and you're just like, oh my god, is this going to finally get to where we're going? It was a long drive. And eventually, about halfway through the drive, we stopped at a rest area. And the rest area was kind of cool. It had coffee and it had a couple other things, and it wasn't bad. We sat there inside of the rest area for a minute, and I drank my coffee. No, I didn't drink coffee. I got black tea that time. There was a cat. No, there were these two cats. And these two cats were like playing with each other, right? And I was trying to get this one cat over to come and like let me pet him, but the one cat would not let me pet him for the life of me. But this other cat jumped off his little friend and came walking over to me and just kind of sat right by me and let me pet him. And I was like, oh, the kitty. Right. Like I do. So Mr. Cat was kind of cool, and, I got to sit there and drink my tea and pet the cat. No big deal. Eventually, we left the little rest area, got back in the van, started going. It was still kind of a long drive. We went down this mountain. We went back up a hill, went back down a mountain again. And eventually we got to a checkpoint. And the checkpoint was kind of confusing. I wasn't quite sure why we had a checkpoint because we're in the same country, but apparently there's like a whole like what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you going through here thing. Um at this checkpoint there was this big sign and I was trying to get my hands on the one sign that said I love Egypt, which I did. So there's that. After we got through it, it was still another 2 hours to get to Luxor. So, so yeah, I sat there. I started going through my notes. I was listening to music. Thankfully, they had internet on the inside of the van, so I turned on Sirius and I was listening to techno music, keeping my brain function like on a plane. And eventually, we got to the hotel. We walk into it. I think this was the Hilton Hotel. Big area on the inside of this place, like huge and giant Christmas tree, and wow, you know, oh, great. You guys saw. Um, but the biggest thing about that night, we were going to go out to dinner before we went to bed, and I was trying to figure out what in the world we were going to dinner at, but it ended up just being on the inside of the hotel at this restaurant, so I just met them in the lobby. As I was waiting for my sister and her boyfriend to come out, I looked over and there was this couple that was taking pictures, a whole photo shoot on the inside of this lobby in this hotel. And I'm like, why? Right? Well, then I realized it was a wedding photo shoot. This girl's dress was incredible. Seriously, it was great. Huge, beautiful dress. And I was like, dude, what in the world are you doing in a hotel lobby? I guess I can't blame her. It was a pretty cool lobby after all. Um, I started sending pictures and taking like, putting it on Facebook. I'm like, well, isn't that an interesting thing to see in the inside of a hotel in the middle of Egypt, right? Um, we get down to the restaurant, and you know, I like kind of turn around and sit down, and Danica, turns me around, and she goes, "I think Lance is probably going to want to sit there." And I kind of look at her, and I'm like, "All right." So I turn around, and the cliff was completely lit up. So you had the restaurant, the Nile, and the cliff that was lit up. Egyptians don't just light up cliffs. And Danica told me that that was the Valley of the Kings. And I probably want to see it. And I was like, touche. All right, fine. You win. So I'm just chilling, sitting by the Nile, staring at the Valley of the Kings in awe, thinking I am that freaking close to the Valley of the Kings. Holy crap. Which actually wasn't that close. It actually still took about an hour and 20 minutes to get to it. Ish. But, still, yeah. Um, worth it. We started eating, and my sister pointed out that one of the delicacies in Egypt is stuffed pigeon. If it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be as experimental with food as I am. I I've opened up a lot with food since her, you know, wild boar, um, rabbit. I've had rabbit. It was on the inside of a Thai meatball of some sort. Thankfully, I had beer. It was a pretty good meatball, but rabbit and pigeon. It was okay. It was really greasy. I guess you'd say it was gamey. It was really greasy. It was small. There's not a lot of meat on it, and when they stuff it with like rice or something. So it was okay, but I probably wouldn't have it again because it's not really filling, you know. Um, it didn't taste any different than say like turkey, honestly. Just very small amount of turkey, very small. Anyway, so I sat back, stared at the yeah. I sat and stared at the Valley of the Kings. Like, I'm this close. Seriously, I'm this close to the Valley of the Kings. Wow. At some point, you have to stop. This hotel, however, this hotel was cool because right next to my room was like a little balcony porch. And so when I came back, I could actually, like, just sit on the porch and meditate. No interruptions, no problems. And all I could hear was the Nile. So I did that a lot while I was in Luxor. Because, I mean, I'm in Luxor, right? And that's when things started getting weird. I'm doing this live stream with everybody. And obviously, I'm telling everybody how cool the hotel is, and I'm good morning, everybody, and right? I get off of my phone, and this cute little Egyptian walks up to me, and she says, "Hi, are you waiting for somebody?" Yes.